Some vampires claim the status of deities among both kindred and kind. Next to Set, Mithras is likely the most infamous of the god Cainites, a Ventrue of incredible age and power, and one of the longest-standing princes in kindred history. Mithras formed a cult of faithful adherents to the Mithric religion, incorporating trappings from the legitimate religion of old and ancient vampiric traditions. Though Mithras was destroyed in the 20th century, and his Diablerist, in turn, reportedly destroyed in the Second Inquisition purge of London, his longtime seneschal and confidant, Roger de Camden, leads the cult of Mithras in his absence. You may be a member of the cult, or even one of its leaders. Perhaps you believe the cult is the key to dominance in the Jihad, taking Mithras' millennia of rule as inspiration. Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to our World of Darkness and another Metaplot Monday. And I'm very excited about this one because we're going to be going over something that actually leans very heavily into my game itself, which is the Cult of Mithras, and specifically the Cult of Mithras Loresheet, and what it can give you if you decide to take this. My interest in the Cult of Mithras is actually goes quite beyond VTM, because it's such an interesting thing, and the fact that the people who put together Cult of the Blood Gods and the people who came up with the concept of putting Mithras in charge of a vampiric sect, pretty much themselves, did their homework. And I'd like to point that out, that I'm very impressed by how much work actually has gone into this, where even the degrees and the names of the stations within the Cult of Mithras for gameplay match those of the actual Cult of Mithras, which existed in Rome thousands of years ago. It's very interesting to see how much has actually gone into this, and the fact that this has, up until at least recently, been considered a living god among the Kindred. That's pretty impressive in a game rule standpoint, because within popularity, Mithras might be one of the few Kindred who rivals the popularity of Cain as a deity figure within Kindred society itself. And I understand that Set himself has his following, but they've taken some major hits. And where Set might be one of those the entire clan has accepted, for the most part, that Set is the dark god Set, Mithras goes over the concept of clan. Mithras does not care about clan. In fact, it's highly debated that Mithras couldn't stand clan Ventrue, and he himself was a Ventrue. So that is actually a very interesting, just way off base what you would expect for a Kindred who claims to be a god. Typically, they would go and talk about how their clan would be the chosen people or something like that. It's very interesting to see that in this situation it is not. Now, let's go ahead and dive into what this lore sheet will actually give, and what we have to say about it, because each of these things, just as all lore sheets, is going to give you something a little bit different. Investing 1 trait gets you Neophyte. Your service to Mithras is in its infancy, but you have learned how to manipulate the kind with talk of religion and grandeur. You can effectively lead a small mortal cult, granting you 1 bonus die to all social roles when interacting with your herd or retainers. This lore comes either from adherence to the cult or through study of its practices. Historically, when dealing in Vampire the Masquerade, social roles between your herd and your retainers don't really come up that often, but in V5 specifically, due to the fact that there are things like touchstones and your retainers and your herd tend to roll over into those facets. I do think it actually is more important nowadays, and the fact that this gives you, a dice bonus when interacting with them, and that's not like a once per story thing or even a once per session thing like a lot of these lore traits are. Just this is a general cult of personality. They see you as leadership kind of thing. That does come in handy, considering the fact that you could be various types of predator types when taking this. I could definitely see somebody who's playing either an Osiris or even a consensualist take this and have it be easier to feed on their herd, or even just trying to get their retainers to do things that they might instinctually say is a bad idea for themselves. So I think Neophyte is actually a pretty interesting one. It's a very low level, but it's supposed to be. It's a level 1. Investing 2 traits gets you Nymphus. Mithras award the title of Nymphus to new sires within the cult. This lore grants you knowledge of Ventru lineage and customs of embrace, along with the ceremonial status of a revered sire. You gain 2 bonus dice to all rolls in which Ventru or Mithric customs are discussed or studied, and the equivalent of 2 dots in the status background when among the Ventru. I think, considering the fact that this is not a Ventru-specific lore sheet, this might have some hidden uses that most people would really kind of overlook. I myself am reading this and just thinking, what exactly is this going to be good for? But when the way that the Ventru introduce themselves and hold their lineage with pride, being able to use that effectively against them as a different clan seems like it might come in handy quite a bit, giving you 2 bonus traits when dealing with the Mithric customs for one, but also Ventru customs. Ventru customs are typically held in high regard only with Clan Ventru. Imagine being a Brujah who does not have the same respect that a Ventru does when dealing with the Ventru, but being able to list your sire and your sire's sire and their accomplishments, possibly even their deaths if need be. That is something that really does ring true with the Blue Bloods. And given the point that you don't have to be Ventru to be part of the Cult of Mithras, and you don't even have to be Camarilla to be part of the Cult of Mithras, they are completely non-political when it comes to that kind of interaction. They don't care if their members are anarchs. They don't care if their members are Camarilla. And being able to interact like this across clan lines might very well come in handy. Investing 3 traits gets you Leo. Among the most honored members of the Mithric cult, those kindred with the title of Leo are entrusted to deliver clandestine messages between Mithraists, and sometimes even outside the order. Mithraists will not hesitate to trust you with information and messages, and you gain 1 die to all non-disciplined rolls in which you attempt to get other vampires to trust you. Of course, if your allegiance lay outside the cult, this lore grants you access to deeply dangerous intelligence. I can see how this would come in handy in our game right now, considering the fact that everything that's going on is wrapped up in the Cult of Mithras somehow. And not many people actually have access to that inner workings. But nobody's really proven themselves trustworthy. Gaining Leo would actually take a lot of time, but I could see where the closest member of our little coterie in Thicker Than Water would most likely be Damien, getting into that, because he does seem to just be going with it. Of course, we do have Gabriel, who's already a inducted member of Cult of Mithras, but they actually have such a strong trust of the cult itself that even if they had the information that could help them, they might not even use it. So this actually takes into consideration playing a character versus playing what you think is going to be good for the game. I've always been a big fan of the idea of playing the character to the bitter end. And sometimes that just doesn't go well for you. And other times it does. Other times it does. You can actually be doing things and have things just go your way. I played Arthur Mason as a player character before I brought him in as an NPC in a very interesting Anarch game at one point. He was Camarilla, but the majority of the game was Anarch, so it was considered an Anarch game. But when I played him, I played complete faith in my ability and complete idiocy when it came to, yeah, we should probably call for backup. He did not believe that he should call for backup for anything, that it was something that he needed to prove himself. And I do think that it was a low level of that venture arrogance that shines through. This was well before 5th edition came out, so I couldn't blame the compulsion. It was just me playing the character. It was somebody who realized that if he had called for backup, somebody else might get hurt. And Mason was a high humanity, take out the bad guys as fast as you can type of individual. And I found out that there was a bar full of Sabbat, and my storyteller, being a massive sadist at that point in time, decided to say that there were, I think, 11 Zemitzi who all went into horrid form the moment I ran in there with a single pump action shotgun, and somehow walked out clean on the other end and had taken every single one of them out. This is something that should not have happened, but I was throwing like lightning that night. And what I mean by that is we were, this was a LARP, so we were using the rock, paper, scissors system that they used in 2nd edition revised and 20th anniversary LARP and pretty much all the LARP systems. But it was one of those things where like it could have very well been the loss of a character, but I ran in to do what I was going to do, regardless of whether or not I walked out or not. And when you're playing a character, and I know that just seemed like a massive tangent, but when you're playing a character who has gained the position of Leo in the Cult of Mithras, where do your loyalties lie? The way that I've been playing it off in Thicker Than Water is that the Cult of Mithras has complete and utter trust in its members, to the point where when they find something that gives them just a hint of mistrust, they will confront the individual about it and they will talk to them, trying to get the accused to tell them why they're doing a thing. And they trust the answer. I'm really playing off on this cult of personality that Mithras has. And a lot of cults in general, they have a brainwashing. And if you've ever seen anything that has to deal with how cults of personalities are formed, I highly suggest it, because it does show you how to run something like this. And there should be no mistrust. Just going directly in on how the cults should be run. If you've got a position that high up in the cult at this point, you should not question your powder. Investing 4 points into this lore sheet gets you Persis. The Cult of Mithras frequently indulges in ritual, bloodletting, and sacrifice, with the Persis as the master of ceremonies. A vampire declared Persis of Mithras receives a short sword and authority to murder enemies of the cult, with the guarantee of full protection, alibis, secret havens, access to resources, should their identity as killer become known. This lore gives you 3 background dots to allocate in any domain. in which the Cult of Mithras is present. This is instant witness relocation. This is actually pretty cool, but it's more towards breaking domain law in favor of Mithric law, and the fact that they will do anything in their power to keep you alive. I think that's pretty interesting, considering the fact that it just straight out says they will gift you 3 background dots to allocate in any domain that the Cult of Mithras is active. It doesn't give any idea of what it is. If you're going to go to an area that you think might hold somebody who could help you out in this situation, that's 3 points towards Mala you can throw down there. If you're going to an area where perhaps the Cult of Mithras keeps a cache of weapons or something like that, you can get resources and you can get retainers and you get herd. There's so many things that you can actually pump those 3 points into. And if you're not afraid to hop from place to place, perhaps you live in one city and there's various Cults of Mithras cities that surround it, then you could very well just take a nightly journey from city to city, completely updating what this does for you at all points in times. Try to create a network of Mithric followers who are willing to help you out in any possible way that they can. And taking a look at what the backgrounds all have to offer may very well be something very important. Considering like the mask background, being able to create an alternate identity. Investing 5 traits into this lore sheet gets you Unconquered. You carry the spark of Mithras within you. Perhaps you took Vitae from his Diabolus Monty Coven, or perhaps you once drank from Mithras himself as part of a blood bond. Now Mithras lives in you. Occasionally the ancient vampire speaks to you in command or guidance, though he's not powerful enough to compel. When you please Mithras, you gain 3 additional dice in Dominate, Fortitude, or Presence tests. Choose one for the remainder of the night. So you have the voice of Mithras in your head telling you what to do. That's very interesting. This is something that I can see coming into my game, considering what's going on right now. I can definitely see an NPC such as Alexander Thorne, who has just been possessed by Mithras, being part of this. And this might actually lead to more fuller stories later on in the game. Considering the fact that the Fall of London storyline in my game was a memoriam of sorts, so that I could work it into what I was already doing with Thicker Than Water. Any of my characters have access to having this kind of thing happen, due to the fact that they were all heralds of the sun at one point in time. So taking all of these into consideration, the Cult of Mithras is just a mind-blowing addition to the world of darkness. It was always there, to my knowledge. Like, there was always the thought of a Ventru cult or something like that. But the fact that it is expanded in such a way in V5, you could actually run an entire game that is nothing but the Cult of Mithras. And probably have a darn good time doing that. Because the Cult of Mithras has such a rich history and such a strange endgame. You know, they want to get Mithras back in power, but there are so many things that are getting in the way. His Diablerie by Monty Coven, the Blitz. Like, where exactly did Fall of London lead your campaign if you ran anything with that? It was a difficult read, but as much as the book Fall of London was hard to get through, the plot line is beautifully orchestrated. It's out of order, in my opinion, but it's so beautifully orchestrated that you're dealing with things that could turn the tides of Kindred history as we know it. So as always, I'm going to ask you, have you used anything from the Cult of Mithras lore sheet? But I do want to go broader on that one. I really want to know if anybody else other than me has just dug into the Cult of Mithras as a major plot point. I started using the Cult of Mithras as something that I wanted to use as antagonist or allies, depending on how the players reacted to it. When they introduced in Sticks and Bones, in the Cult of the Blood God book, a patter from the Cult of Mithras, who tried to be an ally, but could very well have been turned into an enemy, given circumstances. At the auction for the Venetian urn, I ended up taking that character and turning it into one of my NPCs and revamping them here and there, no pun intended. But that introduction really caught my interest. It was the fact that he just introduced himself straight out. There was no secretive anything. It was like running into a stonemason in real life. A guy will just walk up with stonemason regalia and shake your hand and say, "Hi, yeah, I'm like the chapter leader of this place." Like, I never considered that being a possibility in the Cult of Mithras for the World of Darkness. I really did not. I never thought anybody would walk up and go, "Hey, I'm the patter of the sun in the local chapter house for the Cult of Mithras, and we might want to do some fundraising or something like that." Like, that's just not something that really came to mind. I really figured the Cult of Mithras, or any of the cults really, were going to end up being some type of secretive organization where you didn't even know who the members were. But now that they've got it out there, and the Cult of Mithras might not be interested in the political leanings of a city when it comes to the Camarilla and the Anarchs or anything like that, but they do seem to want to have sway over what's going on regardless of who's in charge. So I'm very interested to know what storytellers out there specifically have used the Cult of Mithras in different ways, and also what players have pushed for the Cult of Mithras to become major players in your city. I am Voivode Maquette. This is Our World of Darkness and another episode of Metaplot Monday, where we have gone through the Cult of Mithras Loresheet. Good evening.